This is a good cappuccino.
Hey,
See,
appreciate it.
because
I still got it.
not
Still
only
got it, I guess.
If this, cargo sense thing falls through, you got this.
The number of times I've
once
heard
the
that.
cargo sense thing is successfully sold, he'll be able to go back to being
true passion.
His true passion.
Yes, making coffee.
You're going to open
At
a coffee
Starbucks.
shop.
That's
not at Starbucks. Your own
An artisanal.
I've thought about it. I've thought about that honestly.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and
It doesn't surprise me.
I mean, maybe 10 years ago that was attractive. It's not attractive anymore. I don't know.
I wouldn't want to run retail.
I don't think I want to run a cafe.
I have a funny story about sort of like desk job versus real world job, especially since that seems to be in the news these days about what a real job is in America. But
Sure.
I distinctly remember early in my career, I was a newspaper reporter, not getting paid a lot, spending ungodly hours to be told how bad I was doing. And all under fluorescent lights, old computers, literally green screen when I started. And I remember my friend told me that he got a job at a local golf course, like doing the landscaping maintenance on like bunkers and greens. And I was like, man, that sounds amazing, actually. I like just to be outside all day, getting strong, getting vitamin D. And meanwhile, I'm just being told, everything that I spent 5 hours on was like really bad.
Just garbage.
Yeah, just garbage. So go spend 5 more hours under these fluorescent lights. So, you have these fantasies and then it's like, then after you have a back problem, 3 months later, it's like,
no,
there's a reason why manual labor is not a preferred vocation for a lot of people. So,
yeah, no, there's a certain like you go to work and you push dirt around and that's what it is. And
you leave it there.
And, you've actually, you can kind of see the effort that you put in at the end of the day. Like, hey, I made that better. I cleaned that up or, right.
You get closure.
Yeah. Like and immediate feedback and, you don't have to.
Instead of metaphorically pushing the rock up the hill.
Yeah.
All day.
Like Sisyphus.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need a thing on there that says, we understand what Sisyphus was all about.
Yep. Do we?
Yeah. Not Camus' interpretation of him either, which is, yes, but the value is in the work, not in the end goal.
Sure.
No, wrong.
Right.
we want the end goal too.
Yeah.
We need some little wins along the way.
The value is sitting and looking at the ocean after having done well.
Yeah.
All right, let's do the dance break. Let's get started. I think this will be number 11. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like craps.
Yes. 7-Eleven. All right. Man, we've got a good one. I can feel it.
Yeah.
This is going to be good.
It's putting pressure on you immediately.
You're setting me up for a failure here.
Not least because we've got like a hard stop. So like we got to cram this one in. Our guests on the crosstalk today, I don't think you really need an introduction, but I'm going to give you one anyway. If you're tuning into this, you know who Eric is. He's a senior editor for technology at the Journal of Commerce, and his now, if I've done the math right, 2-decade career.
2-decade plus, unfortunately.
2-decade plus has been focused, at least in the last half, on journaling how software is used across the supply chain ecosystem. Our guest today is Eric Johnson. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. I'm delighted to be here, having watched multiple episodes of the show before.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. It's and
kind of first time, long time, huh?
Your intro was, in some ways ridiculous. Like my wife is like hearing this from 15 miles away, chuckling to herself,
rolling her eyes,
yeah, as she normally
She's
does.
Like, that's the introduction he needed today.
Exactly.
So I want to get into, I think the best jumping into is going to be around the conference that you just helped run at Long Beach. We haven't managed to get out there yet. We probably will next year, I think.
We'll make that happen next year for sure.
But TPM, I really just want to get your perspective on like what things stuck out to you, especially now that we're kind of 2 weeks on and you've had time to sort of just like process and digest stuff. So,
yep.
What's your biggest thing coming away from TPM?
It's hard to say. This event used to be about shippers negotiating ocean freight rates with carriers and freight forwarders, ocean carriers and freight forwarders. And then we would interview some of those people on stage, and then they'd go and find a hotel room and hash out their negotiated rates.
Okay.
It's because, that's the historical kind of start of this. This was the 25th year. It is sort of evolved into being this very multifaceted kind of conference. So to say there's one thing that emerged is hard. I'm focused on tech, so I'm always going to be like a little more keenly aware of what's going on that side of things. Tariffs, if you made me pick one thing, tariffs is like the topic du jour every day. Du jour, tous les jours for our French speakers. I joked on stage because I had a session on tariffs on the second day, which was a Tuesday, and I'm like, it's no longer Taco Tuesday, it's Tariff Tuesday. So, because literally the tariffs on Mexico and Canada and China were all going into effect that morning or had gone into effect. So clearly the uncertainty about how to navigate the policy of this administration is like top of mind for everybody. I think, talking to a couple forwarders on site there, 50% of their discussions were about tariffs. They weren't about service levels and rate negotiations.
It's like whatever you came into it thinking you were going to, a few months ago, it's just like, all right, that's all out the window. We all need to focus on this ball for now.
Yeah, or don't focus on it. I think a lot of the people on stage who spoke about it were kind of like trying to give a sense of how disruptive or how unusual this type of approach has been. And the advice was mostly like, take a deep breath, take a step back, don't do anything drastic until things settle in some pattern. So if it's a 75% tariff, that's a big pill to swallow, but at least how to work with that. If it's 25% and then another 10% and back to 25% and then 0, and you can't make any decisions based on that. So
or you get caught out in a weird place because you made a bunch of adjustments and then that just shifts out from under you anyway.
Or you go to another sourcing location and that's the next country that's being focused on, or targeted with tariffs. So
with the whole thing of reciprocal tariffs anyway, every country's on the table.
Potentially.
Right.
Potentially, yeah.
Depending on the good.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Depending on the good, depending on what trade barriers they have, tariff and non-tariff, including wage levels. Yeah. That's a barrier that the administration is going to look at. So, it's I don't think we've ever been in TPM has never been like that before. I think my boss, who's the guy, Peter Tershwell, he's the one who founded TPM. It was literally his brainchild 25 years ago. He said, we've never had, TPM has always been something huge is going to hit the industry. Here's how you plan for it. Or something happened in the months leading up to TPM. How did we all react to it?
It's never in the midst of it. Yeah.
We can't collectively recall a time where there was literally news breaking about what we were talking about while we were on stage talking about it. So it was actually
the
really
administration used. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. We were joking that we have, we're the only one who has the ear of the administration. It's like, can you hold off on this until March 4th? So
could it be really good if I was on stage and could announce the fact that you're dropping this on that day?
Yeah, so. that would be ideal if you guys could do that. So I wish we had so much power, but unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was. That, and then on the technology side, I would say AI is, I think, hard to escape the discussions these days. So what I really tried to do was not, like last year, I actually had a swear jar on stage, and if anyone said AI, they had to drop $1 in. Yeah. This year, I tried to not dance around it, and we tried to confront it, but confront it in a way that mattered to people who are on site, because the people who are there are not chief technology officers or chief, digital officers or transformation officers. They are people involved in logistics and generally in ops in logistics. And so how can we help them understand in little bite-sized pieces where AI is meaningful and where it's not? So that was my focus this year, and hopefully we were successful at that. But you'll have to ask the the people who attended TPM because I'm not a fair judge of that. So,
well, I mean, maybe should we expect like 5 new ventures that's like a AI agent for tariffs this year? Yeah.
Already. So, I mean, in the weeks leading up to TPM, I had at least 3 people reach out to me with companies that had been founded in the last year working on trade compliance stuff.
Okay.
Given what's going on in tariffs, I can only imagine that number will like 10x over the next year, right? So, I mean, the main thing on the agent side is it takes so little, and you guys would know this better than me, it takes way less manpower and money to spin something up around that than it did.
Well, to spin it up to make it seem like it's doing something
product.
And then it's not. But yes.
Right.
Yeah. Those are going to be like the things that go up really high and then crash really quick.
The interesting thing I think is, and we're already diverging off into AI agents. So I think the companies that I've talked to, what's interesting to me is they have different expectations around the outcome of this company or their companies than 10 years ago, where some of the bigger names that are still around raised gobs of money with the idea of like Uberizing, and I don't mean like crowdsourcing and sharing, but becoming that ubiquitous name in logistics, and they raised money to that effect, and then confronted the fragmentation of the industry that's a feature, not a bug.
Yep.
These guys and it's mostly young guys in their 20s, have very rational seeming goals for their companies. They realize there's going to be 1,000 companies that are building agents for something or other. And they seem to be in the mindset that let's just get acquired, have a quick outcome, don't raise too much money.
Oh, yeah.
And then maybe do something that's actually more interesting to them than building a voice agent for a trucker to tell, to check, check-in calls basically.
Right.
So, or, some process that is very interesting to the people who do it, but is not maybe so interesting to an entrepreneur who has bigger ambitions.
Yeah, very sort of like very truncated lifespans for these things where they're like, we're going to build a feature that we think we'll be able to sell into one of these bigger players.
Right, whether it's a 3PL or a bigger software company. Yeah, I think that's
it's like the 80s of gaming software. The same kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of.
There's a bunch of little startups that would, like these indie games that would build it up to think that they would be acquired by one of the bigger companies over time, like Bethesda or something like that.
Interesting. Yeah.
I came from near Bethesda. I grew up near where Bethesda was founded. Coursegold is where they are in California.
Yep.
So in the mountains. I was just at a conference, a healthcare conference in Philadelphia the last couple of days. AI was a topic. We were actually on a panel about fraud. And sorry, got things happening here. But in that panel, there was a question on AI. It's like, how is AI helping on the fraud thing? Thinking that AI was helping on the fraud thing, and panelists were like, well, AI is being used to actually
create the fraud.
On the other side of the table.
You think a voice agent's bad.
Yeah.
How about something that synthesizes a CEO's voice and calls and gets something done and ordered and people actually respond to it because it is the exact sound of that person's voice that they're working with.
Oh, yeah.
And those people can stand those things up overseas very easily.
Yep.
And they are happening. And so the AI in this case is being used. We think of AI as saying like, okay, well, how's the next startup going to use it to be able to try and disrupt some aspect of it?
It's only for good, right?
It's only for good. But like all tools, depending on who's in control of that tool, there's going to be as many of these things being used for bad purposes as good purposes. And AI is one of those technologies. I always fear people think of like AI is going to take over the world. We're all going to be destroyed because it's the super intelligence is going to say we're going to destroy this part. It's not worth it. When it comes to our intelligence, I'm more worried about what people do with it. It's a tool.
Right.
And in the right hands, that could be a great thing.
It can make you really efficient at something.
It can.
Yeah. So if that something is like getting rid of email work, great. If that something is like hyper accelerating a crime scheme, not so good.
No.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that's true. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna tack on to your thoughts about like kind of how frothy it seems the introduction of this stuff is gonna make the tech scene for a while, and just from the standpoint of, I mean, it's interesting that you say that there's a lot more kind of like sober expectations around how far these things can go, because I look at a lot of these new entrants into the freight tech space that are essentially wrappers around a model and really don't have any kind of like not a lot of depth to like what it's trying to tackle necessarily, like a lot of just like one shot things in my perspective.
Right.
That also I look at the kind of more deep tech side of the AI, where it's like of the AI scene, where it's like, here's a platform where you can build your own voice agent very quickly.
Yeah.
And then you look at these startups that are like a voice agent for something in supply chain and go, okay, well, I feel like I could go over here and like build that in a month. So where's the moat?
I can garage band that myself.
Kind of,
yeah.
right? I mean,
okay, so this
not
actually
to be totally reductive.
No,
but
this came up both. I was at Manifest the month before or 3 weeks before TPM, and it came up there and it came up there. I think what you hit upon is very, and we actually addressed this in some of the AI sessions was, okay, if this has become a something where 15 companies can build something overnight, by definition, it's somewhat commoditized. Not the feature that they're targeting or the whatever process they're targeting, but the underlying ability to build something for that. So I asked a couple people on stage, like, for me, the point of inflection comes when an idiot like me has a tool in my hand where I can build an app, and I know that exists today, but it's not yet. I don't feel like I'm able to build that yet. But at the point where I'm able to build an app to solve a problem rather than scour the market for an app that solves that problem, I think that's a major thing. And I, pushing this out beyond AI, I think there was a question I asked at the beginning of the programming around tech at TPM that I've been thinking about a lot is, so as you said, I've been covering logistics for 20 plus years. Since 2011, I've been focusing on tech. If I think back to my very first conversations with any software vendors in logistics, supply chain, and I go now, I think, what fundamentally has changed about the job in logistics for a shipper, for a freight forwarder, someone at an ocean carrier? Have any of the processes actually changed, or has the software that is enabling them become incrementally better over time and the data more voluminous? You still have to, like, if I think about someone who's in an ocean freight like management role, you have your contract negotiations with carriers, and forwarders, you book against those, either contract rates or spot rates. You manage that shipment via a system, and you use visibility to help monitor that it's going to plan. Or you do planning at some point. I forgot about the planning part of this. Then it triggers some downstream thing that goes in someone else's hands, and then you get an invoice, and you have to figure out if it's correct or not, and you pay it. None of that has changed in 20 years plus. So to me, the most interesting thing around AI is not, can it do some process 30 times faster and 24 hours a day instead of 8 hours a day? It's, does it start to like actually erase parts of the process because they don't need to even be, you don't need to have a human, you don't even need to have a team, you don't even need to have that process. And I don't see any of that happening yet. It's just process replacement rather than actually changing how it's done.
This is a real world thing.
It is a real world thing. Right? Yeah, for sure.
So until AI can directly impact the real world, in robotics and various things like that, you're not going to replace the physical processes and the humans that have to execute those physical processes, and then the information they need to execute those physical processes, and the information they throw off as part of executing those physical processes. You may get into a better job of being able to take that information and do things with it and make decisions, right? And they can maybe have some level of optimization, but other things affect those rates much more dramatically than how quickly you can process, a particular transaction.
The Suez Canal is closed. U.S. is charging $1 million per port call, right? Like that's going to
just dwarf
whatever incremental efficiency you get. Yeah, for sure. You're right.
So it's just, but I mean, you still want those efficiencies. You still need them.
Yeah.
And
you have to have them.
You do. So that it's worth the investment, but it's not disruptive in the sense the world is, like to your point of the Suez, the world is disruptive.
Yeah, I wanted to stay away from calling, saying there hasn't been true transformation or disruption, because those are, people are inured to those words at this point. But
sure,
I just, I was hoping people would think like, okay, well, what in my day to day, like literally, ideally, would not be there. Not just I don't have to answer these emails, but like something in this process that has all these steps. And yeah, they're all attached to physical things. Some of them are, not all of them.
Not all of them.
But like what in that will change? Because I think that's the way that people need to think out into the future about like where AI is going, rather than just, making it 30 times faster than it is today. That's the transitional step, I think.
Yeah, I think that. I think we're of the same mind generally. I mean, I think that certainly last year with your swear jar, right? And then, to an extent this year, I think though we're seeing actual real world applications of like where a LLM is integral to the value proposition, where it's actually, hey, there's a business model here. It's not just name your consultant said we needed an AI strategy, and so this is what we grabbed. But I also think that still there hasn't really been a full reckoning with the reality of just how quickly we're going to be able to see those sorts of gains in that way, where to what you said, where it's like we used to have this entire process or this entire function, and now we don't really think about it all that often unless like something goes really off the rails, because it's just that work just gets done. Right. I still feel like we're a considerable ways off
away.
because and certainly not on the scale that I'm hearing, not just in the supply chain space, but broadly around like applying this stuff to business and into B2B software, where it's like, 3 to 6 months and this is all just going to be
gone,
hands off.
Yeah,
it's like,
sure. I think what's helpful is there are people who are like attaching metrics to this that are understandable for a like person like the lunkheads in logistics, of which I consider myself like hopefully a cipher for, right? Like I try to approach this not in a very highly technical way, but in a like, what does it mean to me way? And so if you say that a freight broker has a tool that enables it to book, an individual employee can book 50 loads an hour instead of 5 loads an hour. That's pretty measurable and astronomical efficiency gains that they were never going to get by just being a better employee.
Right.
Or knowing their carriers better, or knowing their customers better. If you can, this was one of the ones on tariffs and trade compliance that was pitched to me. If you have the ability to take a shipment, an international shipment that comes via email, and route it to an engine that creates a customs entry, and then that gets sent back to the email inbox of your in-house customs broker or your third-party customs broker, and they just have to approve it.
Sure.
Scan it and approve it, because customs requires a domiciled U.S. person to be making that decision. But the actual writing of the entry happened by an engine. Like those are metrics that you can measure the efficiency gains of, and people understand that. And that's going to be something that people invest in, as opposed to this is going to change our business in a very abstract way, right? Like that's a harder sell. So
again, at this conference, Pfizer gave a presentation on AI, And we're like, okay, they're going to give a presentation on AI and what they're doing with it. And they first, we brought up LLMs. They were more thinking of machine learning models as opposed to generative models, right? And this is what they're applying towards planning.
Sure, those still exist, right?
Yeah. Yes. Sure. Well, we all forget that is so that there is, and so they have. Right. So get that they have 17,000 SKUs. They want by the end of this year to get to where 13,000 of those SKUs are planned by these machine learning models, not by people. So if you plan well, you actually optimize logistics.
Right.
Because logistics is driven off the plan.
Right.
So you can meaningfully impact spend in logistics, what you're bringing in from a material perspective, what you're shipping out and trying to stage for consumption that may not be consumed. And you've got to write off inventory, which the healthcare industry does a lot.
Yep.
And so better planning is meaningfully impactful. And so in these slides, she said, we have these 20 models. They're actually planning 10,000 of our goal of 13,000 things so far. And we're going to get to 13,000. It's like $43 billion of product a year for them that'll be planned by these AI systems instead of by human planners. Humans are approving the plan. They want to get to where the humans, like what they call it, on the loop, right? Yep. Humans are not out of the loop or in the loop, but they're on the loop, right? So they're on the loop of these, this is like what you were saying.
Cycling through all the prepositions here.
Well, but it's to your point. A human has to do this because a human, a U.S. domiciled person has to approve this, right? So that's an on the loop, right? The AI is generating this thing. So we use terminology, but she said they gave statistics of each one. This dropped this by 18%. This dropped this by 5%. Those were meaningful to them, because they're talking about $43 billion worth of product.
Right.
So that then impacts logistics and supply chain. It's not a change in the process of logistics that the AI is doing. It is an optimization of what logistics operations you actually even perform.
Right.
Both inbound and outbound.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Based on planning. So those were ML. Those had nothing to do with LLMs.
Yeah. One thing I'm curious to hear your perspective on is the extent to which you're still hearing. I mean, I know that, we covered that the tariffs pretty much just ran a bowling ball through a bunch of things that probably would have been discussed in more depth, but then everybody was just like, ugh. The extent to which people are still talking about labor crunches around the supply chain ecosystem, and how, because that was previously like a really big point of discussion, was just like, hey, I'm worried about keeping people, I'm worried about finding new people, there are fewer entrants into the space than there were previously, and so that was certainly in the immediate post-pandemic period, like the hot topic. Has that really cooled off? And is it just because there are other things that are hotter now, or that like that situation has resolved itself to an extent?
Do you mean in tech, or do you mean just sort of in the supply chain field speaking, generally? That's an interesting question. I actually haven't thought about that in a while. I suspect I don't hear a lot about it anymore, honestly. And I suspect it's cooled for a couple of reasons. A, the hiring market is not as crazy as it was. People are feeling probably a little more, just based on it not being in the pandemic anymore, and also the uncertainty about where the economy is going. I'm suspecting people are less jumpy about like, oh, there's another thing that looks cool and let me jump to that.
Yeah.
I would also suspect that companies are looking more intently at what agents can do and what offshoring has done in the past and what it can continue to do when they're looking to add people, versus let me just go out and hire 10 more people at $250K a pop, and that's fine. But that's not fine, right? Like you need to be more efficient with capital. And so and I think the other thing is on the supply side, you have a huge number of universities now that are producing supply chain focused graduates in a way that was never the case in previous generations. So there's more schools than ever that are churning out people with that focus. There's been 5+ years now of supply chain is an interesting industry and really critical to like the global economy. And so that might be a job, that might be somewhere I can get a job. So I don't think there's that much of a labor shortage now. There's probably skill shortages around how do I find someone who's got curiosity and aptitude and also like knows their way around a LLM and an agent and can work straight off the bat with that. There's definitely because, someone who's been in the industry for 20 years, whatever industry, part of the industry we're talking about, has a ton of experience and expertise and network and understands how things work, but they may be like really a neophyte when it comes to like integrating some of this newer stuff in. So that may be where the skill gap, because if like, again, I keep using freight brokers, but I find the intermediaries kind of the most interesting companies, right? Because they have to be nice with everybody, right? Like they have to placate customers and partners and carriers. And so if you are, if you're looking at adopting some of the things that we were just talking about, you want to have employees who don't need to like go through multiple rounds of training to figure out how to use a voice agent. You want them to be able to like innately kind of understand why that's beneficial and how to work with it. So to the extent there is a skill gap, I think it's less on the like kind of core supply chain stuff and more on how you mix what is coming and what is out there already with that, what you need to know to actually like move goods.
Interesting.
Yeah. No, I think that's any technology transformation. You have the kind of generation that's coming up that has grown up with that technology.
Yeah.
So it's super comfortable. They learn a domain. That technology is part of their like already their comfort zone.
Right.
So they want to apply it to the domain.
Or expectations even.
Right. Like they also try. And they're like, this isn't being used here. We should use this here.
Yeah.
Right? So and people that have been there brute force their way through it. It's second nature to them to do it. They don't have any curiosity about, if you apply this over there, that would actually streamline this process. They just do the process.
I do wonder if this period is going to cut through like the generational divide a little bit, because everybody has been playing around with ChatGPT or whatever your LLM of preference is, and I've heard tons of stories about like people in their 60s and 70s like playing with it more than younger employees, right? Because they feel like they have to go an extra mile to keep up with younger employees on this stuff, and so it is a bit more democratized, I think, than technology has been in the past, but not. There's still a divide.
Not integrated into their business process, though.
Yeah, maybe not.
I think the interactive aspects of generative systems are such that people who used to go search Google, like I remember having to go. We were in this library last night, and they had library card holders, right? You opened it up and remember cards.
The Dewey Decimal System.
The Dewey Decimal System. You had little index cards, and you had to like go figure out what numbered scheme.
You had to really want to read that book.
You did, and then you went and found it, and it was. But then Google came out, and all the things before Yahoo and everything else, Alta Vista, all those technologies basically came out to be able to index things. And then Google came out and said, no, we aren't going to like have humans index things. We can just basically use the way in which things are connected to things, PageRank, to be able to determine what is relevant.
Yeah.
And now you're getting effectively what LLMs encode is a tremendous amount of information. And they can synthesize that back in a way that feels very human, where Google doesn't, right? Alta Vista didn't.
Yeah.
And, and so people went through it. Now it feels very interactive, and it's way more approachable because of that.
Yeah.
The difference is it's very hard to know when that stuff is just true or just not.
And it's not usually domain specific.
Nope.
When you scratch an inch below the surface, it's pretty.
I mean, things are getting better.
So. Yeah, it is getting better. Yeah, for sure.
But the point is, I think people,
or it's good at making that superficial bit sound and look more. Real,
I mean, people that know what they want something to do. It's an amazing tool. Like I want this in 30 words.
Gardening, where to put stuff in a garden. I've heard like 3 people say that they use in the last week that it's transformed their gardening activities. Plant this in this month, in this part of the garden.
Sure.
Yeah. You literally take a photo of it and it'll say, oh, yeah, you should plant these 3 things. Yeah. It's so for sure.
Yeah.
Like known variable things, like where the sun will be at a particular time of day and year.
Yeah.
Your house is not shifting. Your yard is not moving. It's perfect for that. But, you know,
I mean, where y'all took this collides with me for with the there's this kind of like wisdom or truism that has been floating around for a super long time, ever since kind of like OpenAI dropped their first thing, like went public, where it was like it was AI is not going to take your job. Somebody who knows how to utilize AI is going to take your job.
God,
And
that got said so many times. At
Still
TPM
being
too.
said.
I really I have to like throw my flag at that, because I feel like that's not the case. I feel like it is that organizations who figure out how to utilize it best in their business are going to take the best employees. Because those are going to be the places where it's going to that's going to be the best experience to where, I mean, that's kind of where I come down around like not only this discussion but many discussions around like how is this actually going to shake out, is like you personally, if you are just if you're a rank and file employee in some aspect of supply chain, I don't think that spending, you know, burning the midnight oil, like figuring out, oh, I'm really good at using this model or that model or whatever, is actually going to translate into better opportunities for you, or that you're going to like exceed at your job, because just doing that, or like being like utilizing a chatbot as a sort of assistant in your own day to day is one thing, but like actually utilizing that to affect a shift in how your business runs is entirely different.
It's like you figured out how to make a prefab part of a house, but then everybody else is just building a house like the old-fashioned way.
Right.
You're like, okay, cool. I did that super fast. Now I have to wait for you guys for a month to build
everything around it.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And the other, like, I think the freight broker example that you brought up earlier is kind of illustrates this to an extent, because also there's a point where if you are first in the pool, sure, you can swim out pretty far and like you'll have an advantage for a time until everybody catches up. And then it's like, okay, well, if every brokerage can operate at that same velocity, then you don't actually have an advantage in being able to, like you said, book 50 loads a day instead of 5.
Right.
If
That will be the default.
It's not like it changes the dynamics in the market where there is actually more supply of freight that needs to be moved just because you can
move more,
book them faster.
Yeah, for sure.
But I do think that there's something to that. If these systems are being used in this freight brokerage versus this one, the ones that actually are using those, removing what I'll consider mundane, non-very human valuable steps.
Not interesting jobs.
Not interesting jobs, but they have to be done.
Yep.
But if they can do that and leave the interesting parts, every job has some interesting part, right? Everything.
Yep.
And so if they...
podcasting.
Hey, yeah.
even that. He actually has a job beyond this.
It all just builds into this.
It does. It funnels into these microphones.
Yeah.
But if people are using those things, they will attract employees because they're going to say, look, it's just like any employee doing a job and being very, it's grueling. Like you go through these steps and you're like, why am I doing the same thing every time?
Right.
This is automatable. Any person who's not a software developer knows what those things are. Some of the people are very comfortable with those things.
Yeah.
Other people are like, I'm going to go do this thing. I'm going to enter this data off this form into this system, on my green screen, like you talked about early on, and I'm going to do this all day long.
Yeah.
Got to the point where, well, no, we can scan and OCR those things. To, no, people can do online forms.
Yep.
And at each step, that person had to do less and less. Maybe they get to the point where they're just reviewing certain aspects of it, or statistical analysis of those things to be able to say in aggregate, these jump out, you need to look at these, right, for fraud or any of these kinds of things. And so the people are leveling up their more human valuable things. And I think that companies that are taking advantage of these technologies in an assistive fashion are allowing the people, they're going to start drawing in employees that want that too.
Yeah. Which I think is what Chris was saying. Build the fabric of the company around it rather than depending on like stars to kind of carry the way.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we're running not short on time, but shorter on time. And I do want to shift gears to one more thing before we let you go, which is I think the shift in the dynamic around the freight tech scene in general. We're starting to see a lot more acquisitions. We're starting to see some fireworks and punches thrown in the real-time transport visibility space. So I wanted to get your thoughts on either side of those topics, because I feel like they're related to an extent, but like, Trimble buying up everybody basically, and that, what's going on there, and do you see that streak continuing, or what's their next target potentially? And
I wish I knew.
Yeah.
They don't tell me. Yeah, I feel like I have a closer relationship with the White House than I do with some of the companies that people expect me to know what the next acquisition is. I ask a lot, but know. So let's talk about I think the visibility space. I wrote this story a couple weeks ago about FourKite's backing out of the real-time visibility Magic Quadrant. And it was an interesting thing. I saw the blog about it, and I wasn't going to write anything because I thought it was too inside baseball.
Okay.
Right? Because if you think about it, like our readers are logistics managers, forwarders, brokers, right? They are impacted by visibility vendors, but like it's not necessarily my job to say which analysts they should go to see and use and which tools they should use. Like I hopefully provide them with I think I try to give them some sort of framework around which to consider all of the options in the market, right? So FourKites decides to back out of this. Then someone from Project 44 jumps into the comments, creates their own LinkedIn post saying, "Hey, I didn't want to write this." I think it was chief of marketing.
Yeah, but
I didn't want to write this, but I felt I needed to write it. And so I sort of answered, I have a neutral position. I'm extremely dispassionate about this. Like I don't cheer for or against any companies. I'm covering the market. I'm generally friendly with most of the companies in terms of like dialogues, but it's not my place to say I like this company better and this company worse. But so I jumped in and sort of answered, I think, some of what he brought up, and I said, and he acknowledged this. He said, I said, you're not necessarily the right person to be bringing this up, right? Because you are their chief competitor, in this, right? So, and he agreed with
head to head.
Yeah. He agreed with that. But I think he felt like his point still stood. So anyway, I wrote about this, and I even had to convince my own editor. My editor was like, read it, because I wrote it. It was like 1,000 words, which is fairly long for a JOC article. And he's like, this is super niche. Do we really need this? This seems like who cares about this? And I'm like, well,
Chris does.
Honestly, I have one guy who's been begging. No, I'm just kidding. So this is a one-person article. No, but I mean, I think the way I explained it is like a lot of our readers are very likely also Gartner clients, and they are also customers of one of these companies. And so I felt like it was important to sort of go into, what was behind FourKite's decision as best I understood, and how the market was changing and whether the Magic Quadrant was actually capturing the evolution of the market. And you see it from a bunch of things happening before and after that decision, both with FourKites, Project 44, outside of, I would say, Shipio and another French company called Wakio. Most of the other companies now are either focused on a single mode, like ocean, or they have tried to branch out and become somewhat execution related, or to your point earlier, Rich, like very focused on using visibility as a tool to root out theft.
Right.
Yeah, so it's sort of a security platform, right?
Which is like overhaul, right?
Overhaul,
right.
exactly.
No,
exactly.
overhaul does that.
Who's in that quadrant too?
We're, our focus as a company has always been really about discovering exceptions happening in, we'll call the handling process.
Yep.
Right. It's not necessarily theft. It's just damage due to like people doing the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Yep.
And that impact is dramatically bigger from a financial perspective than theft.
Yep.
Theft just sounds terrible.
Yep.
But mishandling happens a lot. So, root that out in using visibility data. You have exceptions. And then how do we get those things back on track? And we've worked on this for now 12 years.
Yeah.
Like, how do we do this? And we've recognized the fact, what was good for us, just real quick on what 4Kites did. We were using these terms 2 years ago: digital twins, digital agents. They call them digital workers, which are basically digital agents. But it was cool. It was like, no, it works. It's a framework through which, and we've spoken on it. It's a good framework through which you can think of applying technology to this. But where we were saying, what are we? So it made us think and have these kinds of internal discussions. Where's our value? What are we doing for our customers? And we consider it exception management, right? You're managing by exception management.
Which is the way I hear shippers discuss it too.
That is.
They don't talk about like, I need more data.
Nope.
It's more like, just tell me when something has gone out of threshold, basically.
Right.
So,
and the shippers themselves want that fixed. So they don't want to even know because they can't act. Only those who have chain of custody of their products can act
at that point.
Correct.
Yeah.
So real frustrating thing is when you talk to shippers and they're like, yeah, I know,
but I can't do anything about it.
Right. Or a 3PL that says my customers know before I know.
Yeah.
And then the actual carriers do the same thing, right? Air carriers, they say they tell us, but they're not our customers because we have forwarders as our customers. So we have this mediating layer. You get into the intermediaries. It's a very complex way of, how do you pull these things together? So anyway,
and I think the complicating factor is a lot of the best known visibility platforms relied upon some sort of mechanism to drive demand, right? So whether it was targeting 3PLs to be their sort of visibility tool, in-house visibility tool, or going after shippers and sort of forcing their intermediaries to use what the shipper wants to use. But the way they did that is not by just marketing like crazy, although they both did market like crazy. They did that, but like that only works to a point. At some point, what worked was partnering with TMS providers that the shippers had to use. They didn't have a choice of using. And once you make it integrated with them, so now you're working with TMS providers, but you're realizing at some point that only goes so far.
Right.
So you have, and if you're hearing, monitoring is nice, execution is existential. You start to get into that like phase of where, how can I be more sticky? Well, then are you sort of upsetting the apple cart when it comes to the partnerships you've created with the actual execution platforms?
Right.
And I think that's the uneasy kind of place where they're residing. So they're sort of having to tiptoe around not duplicating what the TMS partners are doing, but being more than just monitoring.
Yeah. And how do you do that? I know I've seen even Project 44 start to talk about things in terms of orchestration a lot more.
They came out with a procurement tool just this week.
Right.
Procurement
like,
analytics.
So it's like, to the extent, is this category just kind of like disintegrating now, like before our eyes? Because, the two major players that were set up kind of, when was it?
2014, somewhere around there.
Yeah. And then the point at which P44 started raising a lot of money and pushing their valuation really high. And then we got this like, oh, they're the Visa and MasterCard of the entire space, right? And there was that big like,
rush to pick one of them.
Arrival moment. And then now we go, okay, well, 4Kites is going over here and Project 44 is going over there. And the other people in this quadrant never seem to really like.
They're just data providers.
Yeah.
To data providers to other software vendors or to 3PLs or to like broader aggregators. But yeah, I agree that that space is like sort of having some sort of
Existential crisis.
teenage identity crisis or something like that. It doesn't know if it wants to be goth or a jock or I don't know. It's interesting. It's very interesting to watch.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure we'll find out. We'll find out soon. I remember when I came on your show, it was about a year ago now, and we were talking about this to an extent because really none of the pieces had shifted yet, but you could see the tension there that something had to give in one way, shape, or form. And,
it was so hard to sell for 18 months. And when you have those valuations and you've had all that money invested, not selling well for 18 months creates a bit of urgency that,
especially if you need to raise more money.
Especially if you need to raise more money
Which they do. Right.
I couldn't possibly comment.
We'll know once the next round is announced.
Well, I guess so. I guess so.
All right. Well, I think that's where we got to leave it for today. Eric, really appreciate you coming by.
This was
a
super
great
fun.
discussion. We should absolutely do it again soon.
Yeah. I'm not far away.
Yeah, which is great. Yeah. It's good. It's good for us. So, thanks. I'm gonna get some outro music going here. You've got what's the next thing up on your docket here? Is it the Inland Conference that you're really focused on, or?
Actually, we have a conference end of April in the break bulk and project cargo space in New Orleans. So I'll be there. We have a little bit of technology programming. If you ever want to feel good about yourself in logistics and feel like you're not way behind, just go to the project cargo and break bulk space, because that will make you feel like you're on Mars already. So definitely encourage anyone who's in that space to go there and maybe advance the ball in that space. Yeah. But then Inland is end of September and early October in Chicago. So that's my baby. I'm going to be focusing a lot on that over the next few months. So,
all right. Yeah. Cool. Well, maybe we'll catch up with you again before or after that one. But yeah. All right. Thanks, Eric.
They're amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Take care.